I was doing lower middle market private equity. I was buying businesses doing anywhere from $3 million to $15 million. So we run about 14 brands in the health, wellness, and home space.
What's a pattern that usually signals trouble is coming?
It's really when you're seeing marketing dollars and cost of acquisition rise proportionally faster to what you're being able to bring clients in and your revenue rise.
We'll call it a financial happiness study. And basically it was like, how much money would you need to be happy?
We've reduced product costs on some of our categories by 40, 50% after coming here. Same supplier. I think that's the other thing people have forgotten is like businesses are around to make money.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Shipped. Today I am speaking with Bryan Kryzda, CFO and COO at Cove Brands. Bryan, thanks for chatting with me today.
Thank you so much.
So I wanted to start maybe before we get to your background, for those who are listening, can you maybe just give a quick synopsis on Cove Brands, and then we'll jump into a little bit more about you.
Yeah, look, Cove Brands is what you would have used to have thought of as an Amazon aggregator. So back in its previous iteration of life, it was a business that bought small businesses in Amazon and sort of rolled them up into a larger business. That business itself went through a bankruptcy restructuring a couple of years ago, and I was brought in after that to basically run the finances and operations along with my partner. And now we really like to think of ourselves as sort of a digital commerce company. We're digital first, but that doesn't mean that we can't do anything not digital. So we run about 14 brands in the health, wellness, and home space, including some other little niche stuff like baby categories. But we have bestsellers across all of these categories, and we're looking to sort of move into a world where we're growing within those brands and maybe acquiring one or two things a year in the future.
That's awesome. Thank you. So I guess maybe you've kind of gone through like the full life cycle from consulting to banking PE. I guess maybe the first question there is how'd you end up here? And then the second question is maybe more operationally, but let's maybe dive into just how you ended up here, because your career path is non-linear from an outside point of view in.
Yeah, for sure. And look, if you would have asked me when I was back in college if I would have been leading primarily a beauty company nowadays, I would have laughed at you. But the reality is, look, I started consulting, learning how businesses work, banking, understanding what it takes to merge these businesses, private equity, what small business ownership looks like. And that sort of nonlinear led me to a place where I started to work in startup operations and just kind of loved it. And now I find myself in a position where I took advantage of sort of all of the above, right? Within the structuring side of taking a business out of bankruptcy, the consulting side of understanding what it takes to make that business profitable, and then just the operating side of now sitting in seat, building the teams, building out the operations and understanding how we're going to grow and operationalize everything that we thought about. It's been quite a ride, I'll tell you that much, but it is nonlinear. And look, that's the biggest thing is I think things happen for a reason. And as they've sort of played themselves out, I find myself here and I wouldn't be anywhere else.
That's awesome. I want to dive in maybe a little bit deeper. I don't have a whole lot of PE experience, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners don't as well, maybe just from like a broad sense, they have understanding. But I would just assume that the resources you're afforded in PE versus the scrappy startup mentality has got to be vastly different. What's the biggest difference that you've seen from the PE side to where you sit today? And I'm sure it's maybe before today, like maybe step us back a little bit where the resources were a little bit more limited. What are some of those differences that you've seen?
I guess I want to distinguish between the different stages of PE, and like you have these hyper PE funds that everybody thinks about, right? The Carlyles of the world, the Blackstones and all of these guys. Like I was not in that world. I was doing lower middle market private equity. I was buying businesses doing anywhere from $3 million to $15 million in EBITDA on the really, really, really high side. And these were folks who had started their own businesses and had just operated them to a place where they had something nice, and we were interested in taking that to a different level. So while yes, a different world than what we're doing now, not completely unconstrained, right? So we did have to make do with what we had. Sometimes we had some more cash in the form of debt because we were putting some debt on this business, or we were buying multiple of them. So there were some synergies and stuff where you could use that. But I think the primary difference is particularly when you come from a situation post bankruptcy, right? Where there's frankly already been money lost in another situation and now there's new money in. It's like, how do you do a lot more with a lot less? And that's something that we struggle with. And I say struggle because it is a struggle, right? We struggle with on a daily basis of understanding like, how can I take the little that we have and to make the most out of it? And those are the biggest differences, right? In private equity, it never really gets down to that unless you're working on some form of turnaround or something of the sort. But those are the primary differentiators, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting take. I maybe the piggyback there, not to throw any shade at anybody in the PE world, but what do you think the biggest gap between the consultants' recommendations and what actually works, or kind of being in that operator seat are? Do you see them as pretty true to form, or do you find that they're kind of different swim lanes?
I think what I would tell you is that most consultants usually get it right in terms of what the problems are. But knowing what the problem is and actually being able to come in and fix it are two very different things, right? There's a massive human component to it, which is I think what consulting very much misses is, do you have the right humans in the right places who can actually go and operationalize this? I mean, I won't get into the AI side of things because that's just new and it's no one's like, we know where it's headed, but I don't think it's really shaken out just yet. But it is humans, right? You've got humans in seats who are making decisions and doing things and executing on it. And if you don't understand what each of those humans brings to the table and what their strengths and core capabilities are, you can give recommendations all day long, but they'll never materialize, right? If you don't have the right person to make the right choices and to make do the right executing.
Totally. And I would say I can only imagine too, as some of those gaps rear their heads. I guess maybe from the PE side. Well, actually, I'm going to save that for a second question here, so I'll edit that part. But before I get to that, I guess one thing that I want to ask you is, where do you see these operators typically drop the ball when they're scaling from, I would say maybe peeling it back, even from, in the range that you gave is pretty broad range from like 3 to 15. But I think there's a material difference in the business. So let's just say, the difference between scaling from 5 to 25. Where do operators typically drop the ball, and what can you share there?
And dropping the ball sort of assumes that something's been done wrong, right? And I think more than dropping the ball itself, because most of the folks who have built a business to that size are incredible people. Like it takes a lot of work to build a business to that size. I think it's twofold, honestly, what makes him sort of get stuck. One is when you're building a business from the ground up and you've started from nothing, you tend to bring a team along with you. And there's well or not well, there's this sort of familiar feeling to that. And the honest answer is there's a very famous book titled this, but it's What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Right. So there are the different capabilities of that team, of those people, and you need to be able to sort of push past that reality, which is not easy when you've spent 10, 15 years working with the same people. And there's human aspects. And I very much empathize with that reality. And then I think the second one is access to capital, right? Growth is expensive. And again, when you've spent 10, 15 years building a business that's now doing anywhere in the $5 million to $10 million EBITDA range, like you are awesome. Like that is a awesome lifestyle business. Like even if you're working a lot, like you can afford pretty much anything in life. So it's also like, where does that hunger stem from to a certain extent of wanting to take it to the next level? Because you don't have to. Like, I mean, these guys they've got managers, they've got families, they've got everything. And not alone do I not judge him, but like, I empathize with the fact that sometimes it's like, this is what they've built and now they're happy with that. And it takes someone else to come in with that sort of hunger of taking it to the next level and of going and looking for that capital and understanding how to take those risks. Because it's also like, if I have a $5 million business and I'm living a wonderful life, why would I want to take the risk of going out and taking out debt and maybe losing it all? Right. So it's just that juxtaposition of like understanding that risk benefit to the person versus who the next owner is. And look, when they're exiting some of these businesses on the private equity side, it's life-changing money for people. It's like generational wealth.
That's such an interesting thing. Maybe if we just spend a second there, I think I saw a study, and it was something along the lines of, they did a happiness, we'll call it like a financial happiness study, and basically it was like how much money would you need to be happy? And what they equated it out to be was essentially everybody just doubled what they had, right? Is like what their goal was. Um, but I think the interesting thing here with um, an exit, even on a $5 million EBITDA number, would be obviously it's significantly more than double. And so they probably look at that risk factor to your point. And those are things, especially in the AI world, I think you have to think about, especially now because there's so much uncertainty. What do you, if you're looking at maybe historical trends, let's just take the AI thing, like you said, we'll put that to the side. Um, if you're evaluating data, this could be from the current role. It could be a little bit of the PE mixed in because I'm sure that some of this overlaps. But if you're evaluating the data and you're trying to either identify a trend or just maybe the health or state of the business, what's a pattern that usually signals trouble is coming?
It's hard because it depends a lot on the business, but I think I'll stick to the retail side of things, and it's really when you're seeing marketing dollars and cost of acquisition rise really proportionally faster to what you're being able to bring clients in and your revenue rise. That's usually a scary thing. And then the second thing is, I would say, market saturation, right? Suddenly there are categories that you're competing and playing in where you look back and 5 years ago or 3 years ago, there were 50 people in the category. And now there's 500 people in the category. That's also a scary thing. And as you see people with lots of money flooding into some of these categories, like those are the little watch outs of like, hey, maybe I should be pivoting and thinking of this as a category that I want to, we think about it in terms of like, basically, I won't use the last one of the animals, but we have our cows and our sheep, really, and then we have our calves, right? So think about a cow, it's something that is just cash flowing. Like that thing is making you money week on week, and they're wonderful products to have. You're keeping a sharp eye on maintaining those and making sure they don't go anywhere. Then you have your sheep, right? You're not putting as much effort into them and trimming off the wool every once in a while and like just keeping them there. Then you have the calves, are the ones that you're nurturing. You're trying to bring them up and stuff. So as soon as you see something like that, you probably want to start thinking, this is maybe no longer going to be a cow. It's probably going to go into sheep territory. And how do I, one, adjust for that reality, right? And sort of make the set shift of saying, this is no longer going to be what it used to be, right? And that's difficult sometimes, right? Because you're chasing those historical facts sometimes, all of the time, like performance year on year, performance quarter on quarter, and saying, okay, I'm going to put that here, but that releases all of this other money on the side that I can now go and maybe invest in one of the calves that's actually in a category that is seeing different trends. And how do I push that now? And sort of thinking of that and understanding those trends and how those trends that you see up front within customer concentration, within how your cost of acquisition and your dollar of marketing are working and how that's translating into revenue and ultimately profit, because we live and die by how much money we make. Like if we don't make money, we don't pay our debt and we go under. And that's just I think that's the other thing people have forgotten is like businesses are around to make money, not to just sit there and burn money.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You could probably have an entire conversation on that, especially from the venture ecosystem side of things. But maybe to kind of piggyback. So obviously we talked a little bit about maybe like red flags, things to look for. And I think what kind of defines what we would loosely call success within the business. But I think a lot of our listeners are either, we have some folks that have really large operational teams with multi layers. And we have some that are literally just starting out with like single locations or building ops teams for the first time. You've built teams from the ground up. What is the first operations role that you hire for, or that you try to hire for, and why?
Look, I frankly, as my title says it, I run finance and operations, and I consider finance to be like the key part of operations, because, and that's where I'd go. Like we have a phenomenal guy on our VP of finance is amazing, right? And we know our numbers inside and out, and knowing your numbers inside and out, like I can't reiterate how important it is, right? If you don't understand what your business is doing from a financial aspect, you could have the best supply chain guy, the best marketing guy, the best brand guy, the best whatever guy. But if you have no idea where your money's going in a quick enough cadence and how it's going, like unless you're very lucky, you don't survive that. So for me, it's just like get someone in who can tell you very quickly like how you're doing from financial perspective, and that's going to make the massive difference because it'll let you figure out where and how you can allocate dollars to different parts of the business, and that's crucial.
I guess, and maybe we can deep dive that a little bit. It makes perfect sense. I think to maybe piggyback on some of the technology components that we're talking about, like obviously people and process is really important. And then now in today's day and age, you have technology as well.
Yep.
How do you know, Brian, when it's time to stop, manually managing a process and actually invest in the technology? I think in the invention of AI and some of the more even point solutions from like a, specific subset that it's going to help. And that could be for ops, that could be for finance. There's the idea of it's been the way that it works, so let's leave it and not change it. And then there's the ideology of like, hey, we need to be the first to adopt this technology and like that first mover advantage. How do you think about it? And, what is kind of the I guess, top down methodology that you set in the org?
Look, I think it's a couple of things. It's if you don't adopt eventually, like that's not good for anybody. If you look back at most technological advancements in the past, like the people who were resistant to change, ultimately didn't succeed, and the folks who did just became much, much more efficient in what they were doing. I think the key is thinking of technology as a multiplier rather than as something that's going to maybe come in and replace something. Yes, you might have less people doing the same job that it would have required more people to do. But I think the ultimate foundation in understanding where you transition from doing the job to adding technology, and particularly letting technology take more of a leading role in some of it, is you have to understand and have a repeatable process, right? Like if you don't have a repeatable close process, there's no point in adding technology because technology is not going to know what to do, right? And ultimately, that's the key differentiator. So when I think about technology, we're not going to be the first and the early adopters for these things. We don't have the technical capabilities. We're not a tech company. We don't have software engineers and all of these things, which I know some of our competitors do. And I think is everybody has their own decision-making process. But I think one of the real reasons that we've succeeded is because we don't have that stack and don't spend all of the money on those things. And we wait for it to get in. Now that there's some more repeatability to it, yes, we are looking at, for example, how can we leverage the AI stack to basically help us do our inventory reconciliation, which right now takes weeks every month out of our supply chain and our finance team to do it. Does that mean I'm going to get rid of half of my supply chain and half of my finance team tomorrow? Absolutely not. What it does mean is I can now close my numbers once I'm done with this process a week earlier. I have info a week earlier about how our business is performing. And those folks that were spending all of their time doing this close can now go back and actually focus in on their real jobs, which is of making sure that on the inventory and supply chain side of making sure that our products are on the shelf, and on the finance side of being able to actually get payments out, make sure that our accounts are there, all of that other part that doesn't go away because they have to do a close process.
Yeah, that's super. I mean, and I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of people immediately look at like this vast displacement ideology of like, okay, this report is being generated, so now you can cut staff. Where it sounds like you're looking at the technology, or more specifically AI, as like an additional help to your folks and more of an efficiency tool. Are you guys looking at developing those things in-house? Are those things that you're looking and using some of the main model providers, or are you looking for more point solutions?
We actually partner with a firm who's been wonderful in helping us. They're a firm called Arkham, which we were introduced to, and they make basically tailored solutions for us. So they have all of the data scientists and all of these folks, and it's just a cost layer that we don't have to have. It's an external provider that works like an in-house solution. So we have weekly calls with them. They're not a large consultant, which I also dislike the idea of, because a lot of these larger consultants, sometimes they don't have the time of day for you when you're not the Amazons and the Netflixes of the world. Like you're just a small fish. So we found someone small, scrappy, who does it really well, and they're building out the layer helping us implement the layer and then passing it over to us and doing the training of the team to work with it.
That's awesome. I think that's the way to go. And, I think when you, especially today, analyze the build buy scenario, to your point, like you guys sound like you already have enough going on. And if you looked at the CapEx needed to probably do that, it doesn't make sense. So that makes perfect sense.
Well, and
Let's
the cost of data engineers, right?
Yeah,
The data
exactly. Like if you got a couple of data engineers and a couple of full stack
is
engineers and
doubles my P&L. It
yeah,
doubles my head cost on P&L. It's just crazy.
and it's better too, I think, from kind of that service level agreement that you're going to end up having with these folks
Sure.
where there's some inherent protection to your P&L to ensure that the quality is there. And obviously with AI, there's hallucinations and there's different things that happen, but at least at that point, you don't necessarily own it. That's somebody else's problem to figure out. I think that the way you're thinking about it is great. And frankly, a lot of the same people. Now we have had some of their larger orgs that are going to invest, multi-million dollars into this and try to do the build. But, I think it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out and where we sit in a year from now. What's one system, and this could be a technology system or it could just be a process that maybe seemed kind of minor, where maybe even you underestimated the impact, but it completely changed how the business operated?
I wouldn't say it's a system or a technology. It's a thing. And look, you and I talked about this before we started recording. I now spend a month and a half to 2 months of my year in China. The company, nobody had ever been here, right? We manufacture in China, Korea, the US, all over the place. And we didn't know our manufacturers personally. Like that to me was insane. And I've spent the past 2 years basically building those relationships, flying out to Korea, going to see our manufacturers in Florida who make our supplements brands, going to the ones in Austin who make some of our beauty brands, coming here to China for some of the more durables that we make over here. And it changes the business because guess what? When tariffs were announced, we didn't have to stop ordering because our suppliers knew us well enough and we had good enough relationships to where we found mutually beneficial ways to continue doing business. And we were in stock the whole time that tariffs were announced. And in some of our categories, that meant we were able to take an amount of share that folks haven't been able to take back from us because we just were there and we were able to reap the rewards. So I think we live in a world where too many people are disconnected because of remote work and because now you can do everything online. But the value of human connection and of showing you care, I think that's something that gets lost a lot. And it's something that we try to sort of make as well as possible within a world where we have a remote company and we manufacture things halfway across the world.
Yeah, one of my questions was going to be more around the international M&A side, but I think I want to switch gears because to your point, before we started recording, we're talking about the fact that you're in Hong Kong, and I think we could do a whole podcast on the learnings that you've probably pulled out and what maybe would be like a couple of quick tips, like somebody is trying to establish more of a global presence, actually have that relationship with those overseas vendors. What are things they should look for, or like what's kind of the quick shortcut that you could maybe give them? I'm sure you went through trials and tribulations kind of trying to establish the right, things, but what could you share around that?
Look, I think you have to be willing to get on a plane and to be uncomfortable. Like I don't speak Cantonese, which is what they speak in Hong Kong. I also don't speak Chinese or Mandarin, which is what people speak in China. But guess what I do have? I have a phone with Google Translate and a lot of apps that can help you sort of communicate, even if it is uncomfortable. And I think that one of the bigger things, particularly in the retail, you have no idea how many people think they're dealing with a factory and they're dealing with the middleman of the middleman of the middleman, right? So you have no quality control. Your costs are skyrocketing compared to what they should be. And it's just because they don't take the time, frankly, and don't put themselves in that uncomfortable position of, yeah, trust me, look, I spend a month and a half away from my wife, my family, my friends, and I'm 12, 13 hours apart from you guys. Like I'm overlapping 2 hours a day. I spend most of my day alone in Hong Kong, meeting people in China, meeting people that I don't know, living in a culture that's not the same as mine, eating food that isn't always what I want to eat and stuff. But guess what? The value and the benefit that's had to our business, and just personally, there's also a lot of personal growth and meeting, and the people here are wonderful. Like I think we forget sometimes that we live in this insulated reality of what we have and who we spend our time with, that you need to pop your head up and look at everything else that's out there.
That's incredible. What, maybe from just a broad stroke, obviously there's a large sacrifice that you make to be there. Um, is there anything that you can point your finger to over maybe as like a recent win that had you, obviously I know with the tariffs that you've kind of alluded, that was a huge win, but is there any other things or maybe correlations that you can point your finger to and say, like, basically, without investing the time, this wouldn't have been possible?
Absolutely. I mean, we've reduced product costs on some of our categories by 40-50% after coming here. Same supplier, same exact person that we were working with, getting on a plane and having a conversation, explaining how that reduction in cost will help us grow the business and will ultimately be beneficial to both of us, and actually giving them the time of day. Massive difference.
That's incredible. Wow. That's actually a lot more than I would have anticipated that you'd say in that scenario. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but I think to your point, getting face to face with these folks, and you're not just in a WhatsApp group, with somebody that they've never, they don't really have that, like, relationship with Bryan where they feel like, oh wow, this is a really genuine person I'm going to build this relationship with. It's like,
Exactly.
right?
You spend time with them and they're excited to see you. Like, I've met some of my suppliers' kids, right? They'll
That's
come, we'll go see the factory, we'll go have lunch, and they'll bring their families and their kids. And it's nice to meet them, because you also, it humanizes a person on the other side of the conversation. Because also sometimes we're too focused on squeezing every last ounce of cost out of these things when there's someone else on the other side. And if you help that person achieve what they're trying to do, they're definitely going to want to help you achieve what you're trying to do. And that, it's so lost upon us sometimes. And even myself, like I'll blame myself on this when it happens to me every once in a while too, where just like, where am I going to get more savings? And you go directly to COGS, and it's like, wait, no, like, if my manufacturer is not making money, like, their business is going to shut down, and then what am I going to do? Right? Like, and those are the little things that sometimes you just forget, and you have to bring yourself back and ground yourself around.
That's incredible. Well, that's all we have time for today. But before we wrap, if people want to follow along with you and kind of your journey, what's the best place for them to do so?
Look, I'm not the most active on social or anything. I do have my LinkedIn. Cove Brands, we're just doing a rebrand of the store. We're actually careful around how we connect that to some of our brands, just because the reality is, in retail, we've had unfortunate situations where lawyers have tried to milk us because we're a bigger company. So we try and be careful around that. But happy to have people follow me on LinkedIn. We do have one of our brands right now that we launched into Ulta, is a beauty brand. And if folks want to go and follow that, it's an awesome skincare brand run by a magnificent person on our team, Tanushree, who's the founder of the brand. That's called Wild Fleur, Fleur. You can find us on Ulta shelves. We do D2C, and that's sort of one of the big things that we're working on right now. And if anyone wants to look at what type of product we sell and what we're all about, I'd suggest they go and look at that.
That's incredible. And I'll have to have my wife, check it out. I'm consistently getting dragged into Ultas. I'm sure you miss that being in China, but I'm sure when you get home, you'll be doing the same thing. So,
oh yeah, but yeah, for sure, have her try it. Happy to send you some product if you're interested. We can catch up on that. But our claim to fame is our vitamin C. We're the only other folks aside from SkinCeuticals who can actually stabilize L-ascorbic acid at 15% pure L-ascorbic acid. We do it with a flower compound rather than a chemical compound, which we basically own the rights to the patent to that process in the US. And SkinCeuticals has the patent for the chemical process. The big difference is we retail at a $26 price point rather than $180.
Wow. Okay. That's pretty significant. Awesome. Wow. Well, great. Well, Bryan, this has been awesome. I appreciate you taking the time. And for our listeners, if you want to follow Bryan, sounds like you can maybe shoot him a message, but otherwise, hopefully you can visit Ulta and give him some feedback. And Bryan, we'll talk to you soon. Appreciate you being on.